and welcome to another edition of Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom, and if I was to say, do you know who John Wooden is, would you? Now, I know for some people, it's like an obvious yes, of course, we know who John Wooden is. But for others, it might be, no, who is that? And for others, it might be, I have no idea. Because it's getting to that point in history where some of the great figures of the 1900s, the mid-1900s, are starting to become forgotten, starting to become like not even a part of pop culture. People don't refer to them as, like in this case, John Wooden being the coach at UCLA, the basketball coach for the UCLA Bruins. Whenever you talk about sports and you talk about great coaches, John Wooden's name was always at the top, still is, but now people aren't familiar with him, even in the basketball world. And they might say, instead of John Wooden, they might say Mike Krzyzewski at Duke, for example, or maybe Bobby Knight at Indiana. So again, we've gotten to the point in history, or at least moving forward in the future from John Wooden, that a lot of people don't really know about John Wooden. And we're not going to talk about John Wooden specifically tonight, but what we are going to talk about is his pyramid for success. Not going to delve into all of it because it is quite complex, and you can go online and look at it and see all about it. But we're going to touch on some things that it's important to know if we want to be successful. I mean, first of all, you take a look at John Wooden himself. He won, what was it, something like 10 NCAA championships in 12 years at UCLA, including 7 in a row. He had an 88-game win streak at one point before Notre Dame ended the streak. He was the 5-time college coach of the year. He won 164 games overall, 120 of them at UCLA. And so he was pretty dominant in the world of college basketball during his time, and yet a lot of people don't really know much about him. Now, a lot of John Wooden and his success came from the philosophy of, first off, defining what success was to him, and then ultimately, over a period of years, he created and compiled what he calls the building blocks of his pyramid of success. And so as we look towards the future, as we look towards what might come, let's take a look at what the pyramid of success might look like, what it includes, how it can apply to us, and maybe it can help us out a little bit. But first, when you take a look at John Wooden himself, you got to take a look at who he was. Okay, we've talked about it before on the show, the type of people that are like leaderships, championship mentalities, people who have good leadership qualities. I mean, this guy had integrity. He had thoroughness. He stayed with his commitments. What do I mean by that? So he grew up in the Midwest, did John Wooden. In fact, he played basketball, I believe, at the University of Purdue. Well, he got a call. Again, remember, this is in the 1940s, okay? He got a call, or was in negotiations with the University of Minnesota to be their head basketball coach. And that's what he really wanted, because he wanted to stay in the Midwest. He grew up in Indiana. However, due to some inclement weather, common in Minnesota, apparently a phone call from the Golden Gophers did not come through, or didn't happen. So John Wooden, thinking that maybe Minnesota was no longer interested in him, made a commitment to coach UCLA and head out to Los Angeles. Well, after the snowstorm blew over, Minnesota was finally able to get a hold of John Wooden and say, hey, we want you to be our coach. But because John Wooden had already committed to UCLA and had that integrity, he's turned him down and he went to UCLA, and the rest, as they say, is history. But when you take a look at John Wooden and success, I mean, we have to have some sort of definition, don't we? A definition of success and what it means. I mean, each of us might have our own definition of success. We might have our own definition of success as it maybe applies to our lives and what we want. But if you're going to build something called the pyramid of success, You have to have some sort of definition for success. And this was John Wooden's definition for success.
I define success as peace of mind, which can be attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you're capable. Now that's in the hands of all of us. The other is not. We have no control over others, and the more we get concerned in regard to the things over which we have no control, obviously it's going to adversely affect the things over which we have control. So I think all those entered into it, and then of course after coming up with that definition, 14 years later I completed my pyramid to success.
So John Wooden had his definition defined, and then 14 years later the pyramid of success was fully developed. But when you take a look at what he says, it's having peace of mind, knowing that you did your best and that you made yourself the best possible person, focusing on what we can control and not worrying about things we can't control. And in the basketball world, there's a lot of things you can control and a lot of things you can't control in the sports world. I mean, I love baseball. Baseball is my first sport that I enjoy. And you take a look at pitching, for example, and a pitcher, once he releases the ball, he has no control over what happens. He tries to, if it's, let's say, a curveball, he hopes he has proper mechanics to get the spin so that the ball will rotate and the batter doesn't hit it. But again, he really has no control over the ball as soon as it leaves his hand. Sometimes it's a home run, sometimes it's a strike three. But you have no control over it. But what you can control is the pitching mechanics and working on them and striving to do the best that you can with pitching mechanics. In basketball, it would be, as John Wooden, if you looked at some of the things that he talks about, if you go online and want to do more of an internet search of what he does, it's about the fundamentals, practicing the fundamentals, passing, footwork, shooting, free throws. It's the fundamentals, and those are the things that you can control. And so if you have peace of mind, knowing that you did your best, kind of like the saying, there's no price that you can put for having a good night's sleep. Knowing that you did your best, knowing that you put your best foot forward, you didn't give up, you didn't cave, what I like to say is this. We always talk about, or the phrase is always give 100% or give 110%, right? Give it your all. Well, what if we don't have our all sometimes? What if we don't have 100% in us? Maybe we only have 75% in us. Well, can we give 100% of that 75%? And if we did our best. If we have 50%, I know a lot of teachers at this time of year start to get tired. Frustration sets in. It's been a long half a year so far, and we're trying to get to break, right? But are you still giving it your best when you're at school, even though you don't have 100%? If you're in business, and I know sometimes you have quarterly fiscal budgetary things that you have to try to meet, and you're striving to reach those, and you're exhausted because you've been out there doing whatever it is you do to try to meet those goals, those quotas, those goals and things that you set for yourself, and you're running on empty. But are you giving 100% of empty? And I think once you put your head on the pillow at night and you reflect on the day and said, you know what? I did my best. I gave it my all. I think that gives you the peace of mind, knowing you did your best. If you sat there and you said, you had an opportunity with a student, maybe to try to help them, and maybe you just kind of brush them off, which may even be okay. Sometimes going the extra mile is not in the job description, but we do it anyways. And so maybe this time you're just like, I just can't go the extra mile. But did you give your best? And are you judging yourself too harshly? So again, realistic expectations. But if you can, at the end of the day, or if you can, whenever you have reflection, realize that, okay, you know what? I do have peace of mind because I did give it my all. I did focus on me being in control of the things that I can, not worrying about the things I can't control. And you have to decide for yourself what that might be, because we all know that there is no one size fits all. Everybody's goals, everybody's commitments, job descriptions, outcomes, different from person to person, and personality and character to personality and character. So again, you define what it is. And if you can put your head on the pillow at night and say, you know what, I've got peace of mind knowing that what I did today, what I've been doing is the best that I possibly can. And that's success. And you notice how he doesn't talk about score, doesn't talk about wins and losses, doesn't talk about all these other things. It's talk about doing your best. But then that also leads us to some other things. Okay, so we have success and we've defined success. But now what are we going to do to achieve success or to go about achieving success? And that's where the pyramid of success comes from. But again, you got to be able to be open to the ups, the downs. I mean, you think about the players that John Wooden had, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton. Pretty good names. And there's a whole slew of others that he was able to coach. But again, getting each one of them prepared, getting each one of them in a position where they have the best chance for success on the court was his job. And these are some pretty high-profile names. And even in college, they were high-profile names. But what about being prepared? Things don't always go our way. I mean, there's a number of sports stories that we can throw out there where we lose more from losing, or we learn more from losing than we do from winning. And those lessons in losing can sometimes carry us further than if we never suffered those losses.
Never once did my players hear me mention winning. But always, every day at practice and the last thing almost before the tip-off of every game we played, they would hear me say, when the game is over, I want your head up. And there's only one way that it can be up. And you're the only one will know whether or not it could be up, because you can fool other people. You're the only one that will really know whether you've done the things you should have done, not just in practice each day, but between practices, so that you would be in the best possible position for this particular game. If you do that, the score won't really matter, but I really have a feeling that more often than not, the score will also be to your liking.
If you give it your all, and you've worked hard, did your due diligence in practice, maybe in preparation for that meeting the next day, whatever it is. But if you did your due diligence to prepare, then you can hold your head up knowing that you did the best you can. And even if it's not successful, oftentimes, look at John Wood lost 147 games at UCLA, 162 games overall. Didn't win every game, but he was in a position to win a lot more than he did losing. And so always, will you be successful? No. There will be times where perhaps you do stumble and fall. But if you do fail and you know you did your best because you prepared and you prepared properly, like he said in the clip, most of the time you're going to end up with success. And that's what you got to get to. So what is this pyramid of success? Well, if you watch the video portion of it, it's up on the screen. But basically, it's a pyramid. Literally looks like a pyramid. You've got different blocks that are more blocks at the bottom, and then it contours up into a pyramid. And at the top, you've got ultimately your competitive greatness. But there's many things. We're not going to go over all of them because we don't have the time. But one of the basic cornerstones, okay, if you don't know what a cornerstone is, the cornerstone of a building, of a pyramid, of things that are built, usually the most important. It's the one that sits at the corner and it's going to hold up the foundation. It's going to be, if you have to have a straight line in building a building or a pyramid, that's going to be the one that has to be aligned the best for the rest of the construction to go as planned. And so one of the basic cornerstones is industriousness. And then the other one is enthusiasm. But what's industriousness? That's a term that we don't really use, right? We think of industry, but industrious. There is no substitute for work. Worthwhile results come from hard work and careful planning. That is the building block of success. The cornerstone of success is you have to put in the work. You have to put in the work, whether it's preparation, whether it's performance during a game, during a business meeting, during a sales with a client, whatever it is. You have to first prepare, but then you have to put in the work. And the result of that will come from the work that you put in. If you're putting in hard work and carefully planning, the more success you're going to have. If you don't, success will be less. And take a look at a lot of sports teams. A lot of sports teams will prepare. I mean, you take a look at, let's say, college football. Everybody has a week to prepare, right? And they all have the same amount of hours to prepare. Some obviously have the talent, but again, you've got to prepare. And are you preparing the right way? The other cornerstone was enthusiasm, which really has to do with your circle, those that you come in contact with. First of all, you got to enjoy what you're doing. You got to be able to live life. You know, you're the one that has to live your life. So are you doing what you want to do? Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of videos lately on social media. And again, I don't put a whole lot of stock into social media, but it does give us a little bit of a litmus test of what society is thinking. And there's a lot of teachers right now at this time of year that are kind of posting some kind of depressing videos. Some of it have to do with gifts they're receiving. Others have to do with some other things. But it's like, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, go do something else. And if you're stuck because of retirement, and that's your reason that you have to grind it out, being unhappy for the next few years, is it really worth it? I guess that's a question you have to answer. But if you've got industrious on one side, you're working hard, you're putting in the hours. I mean, a lot of successful people will tell you that, like maybe people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and some of these other people, they don't take weekends off. Their Sunday through Saturday is pretty much the same thing. Working hard, working hard. And if you're putting in the work, you have to do something that's fun. You have to do something that you're going to enjoy. If you're not enjoying it anymore, how much success are you going to have because your preparation and the work that you're putting in isn't going to be very good? The other thing that comes along with it, kind of on the bottom portion of the pyramid, is friendship. So think about that. Enthusiasm coming from people that you're in contact with, the work that you're doing, things like that. And now you've got friendship. And friendship comes from the mutual esteem, respect, and devotion, kind of like a marriage, he says. It must not be taken for granted, but requires joint effort. So you're building business relationships. You're building friendships. A lot of times it's online nowadays. Maybe we need to get back to in-person type of stuff. What about loyalty? Another building block for success. Got to be loyal to yourself and to all those depending on you. Loyalty also includes keeping your self-respect. Are you selling yourself out to try to be successful? You're putting in the hard work and you're doing it the right way. Because again, you've got people relying on you. If you are in management, if you're an educator, if you're in law enforcement, if you're a first responder, if you're in the hospitals, whatever it is you do, people are relying on you, whether it's family, whether it's your clients, the people that you are there to help. Are you loyal to that? And if you can't have, and if you notice one thing that goes on with this pyramid of success, it's all intertwined. It's not like a block, a block, a block. It's all intertwined. Because you can't have hard work. You can't be industrious and have industriousness, as John Wooden says, which is no substitute for work, 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 without enthusiasm. If you don't have enthusiasm, if you're not excited about what you're doing, and you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're not going to put in the work. If you don't have the friendships or the business relationships or the working relationships, and they're not loyal, how are you going to have success? And then with those people, those friendships, the loyalty and so forth, you have cooperation. You have cooperation at all levels with the people that you work with, whether it's coworkers. Do they listen to you? Do you listen to them? Are you just listening or are you hearing them? Are you interested in finding the best way for success moving forward, or are you just interested in having your own way? If you're interested in having your own way, chances are you're going to eventually lose the loyalty, lose the friendships, the relationships, the contacts. Cooperation is going to evaporate, and your pyramid is going to come crashing down. So you have to have all these things, and it's as the base of your pyramid for success. Industriousness, no substitute for work. Friendship, mutual esteem, respect, devotion must not be taken for granted. Loyalty to yourself and those depending on you. Cooperation at all levels, from management to the daily grinders and up and down your levels of management, I guess you can say, up and down your lineup. And then be interested in coming together and finding the best way for success as a team. And then enthusiasm. And so there you have your basic building blocks for the bottom of your pyramid. Industriousness, friendship, loyalty, cooperation, enthusiasm. And again, they're all interwoven. And then from there, you can start moving up. Because without a solid foundation, the house is going to collapse. Right? If you build your house upon the sand, not very stable, it's going to, water comes, knocks it out. If you're building on a rock, a lot better foundation, right? So again, and nowadays, depending on where you're at, but in the city, if you've ever watched someone with a construction crew, you notice that they're putting, rebarb in there and other things, not just cinder blocks anymore or cement or concrete. They're making a solid foundation so that building will last. And then you move up and you got self-control. Are you practicing self-discipline? Keeping your emotions under control? Are you practicing good judgment and common sense? That's one thing we lack in society today, common sense, good judgment. Common sense, reasoning, logic, that's out the window these days. We have a lot of illogical, irrational people that are just thriving off of emotion. Don't think about anything. Think about the election we just had. And then the aftermath, all the people that voted for Harris running the social media with all this nonsense about shaving your head and wearing blue bracelets and breaking up with your significant other and staying celibate for the next 4 years. And all. There's nothing rational about that. Nothing logical about that. Really no self-control. Wonder how successful these people will be. But you're practicing self-control. And then from there, are you going to be alert, observing constantly, staying open-minded? We've talked about being open-minded before. You want to be open-minded where you sit there and you look at what's being presented to you. Then you think it over. Maybe go do some research. Maybe investigate a little bit. Maybe you form your own conclusion. And then you decide whether it's good or bad. A good idea, bad idea. So you keep your emotions under control. You have good judgment. But then you're also being alert to see if the winds of change are coming. If we have to reinvent ourselves. If something's becoming obsolete. And then we have to take the initiative or have the ability to make those decisions, especially if you want to be a true leader. And sometimes we have to think on our own. Okay, what is it that I want to do that maybe is going against what the popular opinion might be, but I know deep down that the popular opinion won't be so successful because my vision is a little better. And it's okay to come up with your own vision. It's okay to come up with your own way of thinking. People might think it's selfish. Oh, you're talking about being cooperative. You're talking about being loyal. You're talking about, having friendships. Yes. But again, you also have people depending on you. And if you're the one that is in the position to make the right decisions, are you making the right decisions? And sometimes that might be a decision that you have to take and go out on a limb on your own and make that decision. So you're taking the initiative to make those decisions, even though you might be on your own. And you're not afraid of the failure that may come. But again, if you're prepping, if you're working hard, if you're doing the time, chances are you could have success more often than you have failure. And then what about intentness? Another building block for the pyramid of success. Set realistic goals. You have to have realistic goals. You know, it's okay to have different levels of goals, your ultimate dream goals, then maybe your next level, and then your basic level. You know, what are we going to do first? What's our first step of success? Because you have to enjoy success at some point to keep going. That leads to enthusiasm. Having any amount of success leads to enthusiasm. Enthusiasm wants you to put in more work. So you have to have some success. So baby step success, maybe a little bit more. And then you have the ultimate form of success. And then what about your condition, your mentality? What about your moral condition? What about your physical condition? Are you getting enough rest? Are you exercising enough? How about your diet? These are all things that John Wooden considered a part of success and his pyramid of success. Is what condition are you in? And you're starting to move up the pyramid. I mean, condition starts the third layer. So you have industriousness, no substitute for work, friendships that are relationships built on respect and devotion, loyalty to yourself and people depending on you, cooperation with those that you work with, and enthusiasm, enjoying what you're doing. That's the basic level. That's the bottom level. Then from there, you go to self-control, keeping your emotions under control, having good judgment and common sense are essential, says John Wooden. Alertness, observing constantly, taking the initiative to make those decisions when the time comes. And then intentness, having realistic goals, concentrating on achievement, resisting the temptations that might distract you, and being determined and persistent to follow your path. That's the second layer. Now we start to get into the heart of the pyramid. And your condition, is it your mental, moral, and physical condition? Are you getting enough rest? Are you exercising? Are you eating well? And think about it from an athletic perspective too. I mean, if it doesn't make sense, if some of this stuff doesn't make sense, you're like, what? Think about it from an athletic perspective, okay? You've got to have, first of all, let's start with the physical aspects, okay? The physical aspects, your body has to be in shape. Exercise and diet, strength and conditioning. Maybe the mind, you now have sports psychologists. And then, your morale. Is it good? Is it bad? Are you doing good things to help your morale, or are you getting depressed? And then the sports world, it's easy to have, when you have a bad game, you kind of get down, right? Bring yourself out of it. You got to bring yourself out of that hitting streak or that hitting slump and start getting into a hitting streak, right? So again, what's your condition? What's your condition like? So you got to start working on that. How about your skill? A knowledge of and the ability to properly and quickly execute the fundamentals. Be prepared and cover every little detail. And that was one of the big things. The fundamentals was one of the biggest things that John Wooden ever talked about. In fact, the fundamentals is probably one of the biggest things that he focused on, so much so that here's a story that John Wooden shares about shoes and socks. And again, shoes and socks dealing with the fundamental aspect of basketball.
Well, let's talk a little more specifically about the way you taught your players at UCLA. Now, at the beginning of the year, you had some routines that you helped them understand the importance of fundamentals.
They laugh about that, and one of them has a poem now that's, I still put my socks on this very same way. First thing, when I talked to them early meeting a couple of weeks before practice would start, I'd call them together again and stress again why they're there for academic reasons. That must be number one. But I'd stress other things about politeness and courtesy and how they treat everybody else and so on. And then I'd say, now, young man, I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to show you how to put on your shoes and socks. Oh, okay, here it comes again. But I'd found out many years before that blisters of your feet surely come around the little toe area and the heel area. And they're usually caused by wrinkles in the socks or shoes that don't fit properly. So I showed them how to put on their socks. I'd take mine, I'll put them so there'd be no wrinkles around the little toe, and pull it up, and then tell them how to open the shoe and lace it tightly. And I found out that most players had wore shoes that were maybe a size, or at least a half size larger than they should. I didn't want any slipping, because basketball is quick stops and starts, change direction, change. I didn't want any slipping. That will cause blisters. Now, the reason that children they're accustomed to wearing shoes a little too long, and I suspect many of your parents will find this true. You buy shoes for your children a thumbnail too long. They never get to wear shoes that fit. Their shoes are worn out before their foot goes into it. So you get some new shoes, half a million and a fingernail too long. And so I think that's the reason. So I wanted the toes right at the end, where there'd be no slippage.
And so there, dealing with the fundamentals, down to the point of your shoes and socks, putting them on the right way so that you don't get blisters, and having to kind of instill that to the point where, as of that conversation, other players that were under the tutelage of John Wooden still put their shoes and socks on the way he taught them. And there was a poem about it. Remember, my father, who served in the military, was talking about how the feet were the most important thing. You always had to carry dry socks. And if you watch military movies, maybe like We Were Soldiers, for example, there's references to keeping your feet dry, having an extra pair of dry socks, things like that. So the feet are important, especially when it comes to athletics. So teaching somebody to put your socks on so that there's no wrinkle in the sock that your foot now will rub against, that would develop a blister, causing you to now have an injury, so to speak, and limit your participation. And then having the proper sized shoe. I mean, that's getting down to the basics. So you're paying attention and you're focusing on the details of the littlest of things. And that can make you successful. There was a video clip of Nick Saban when he was at Alabama, and it ran around social media for a while. But he was calling timeout. I guess Alabama was playing somebody, and they pretty much had the game, in the bag, but it was late. And the opposition, I guess Alabama was on defense, so the opposition made a shift change or whatever they did. And so Nick Saban's yelling, nickel defense. And he had to call a timeout, and he's yelling at the players to pay attention to detail. Even though you're up by so many points, you need to pay attention to what the other team's doing and adjust, and you should be in the right defense, because at some point in time, it's going to be a close game, and you're going to have to make that transition to an alternate defensive formation in order to make a stop and win the game. So it's focusing on the difference. So the way you put your shoe and sock on can make the difference between whether or not that foot gets a blister. And again, thinking about the starting and stopping of basketball and the quick cuts, the feet are important, and dealing with blisters is a negative thing. And so again, make sure you have the right shoes, the right shoe size, the socks are put on the wrong way. When your feet are in good condition, now you're prepared to compete. So paying attention to some of the smallest details can make the difference between success and failure. I'm not sure, again, this could be another outdated analogy, but the story in the Netherlands about the boy that stuck his finger in the hole in the dike. Holland is below level. The Netherlands are below level on sea level. So they have dikes all around to keep the water out. And apparently there was a hole. And so there was a leak, and he stuck his finger in. Did that really do anything? No. But again, if he would have ran and got help, seal it up. Or maybe you saw, Chevy Chase's Vegas vacation when he goes on the dam tour and water starts to come through and he puts the bubble gum on and the bubble gum starts to look. Is that successful in repairing that? No. Now, granted, folklore, fairy tales, and movies, they are what they are. But again, it's the littlest of things that make you successful. Watching the bottom line, making sure you have every detail. Think about lawyers. I mean, lawyers have to have all the information as much as they can gather in order to win a case. And it might come down to the littlest of things. I mean, we see them in movies all the time. Of course, movies are scripted, but it's a good example. Just the littlest of things might make a difference between your client getting off or going to jail for life. You having a high prosecution rate and getting advanced to run for the DA, or you're still a public defender. Makes a big difference. There was a time when I was working in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, sports director, do basketball games, play-by-play, and there was a coach from the town of Alliance, about 55 miles away, and for a couple of years there, they had a really good team. And I would talk to the coach, and we would have some conversation. In fact, it was probably one of the only opponent coaches that I got to know really well and had a lot of conversation with. And he gave me a lot of inside scoop into his basketball program, which actually helped broadcasting games against that team and made it more informative to the listener. But again, in talking with him, some of the things that they talked about were the things they could control. Rebounding. Can we get the offensive rebound? Can we get the defensive rebound? Are we out rebounding our opponent? Those are things that they could control. Are we making free throws? If we're making free throws, those are things we can control. Are we eliminating turnovers? What's our shooting percentage? Are we taking good quality shots leading to good quality shooting percentage? Or are we like the NBA now and hucking things up, shooting 17 of 56 from 3-point line and not making anything and losing games? So they were focusing on these statistical categories on things they could control and not necessarily the score, because if you win these categories, chances are you're winning the score. Now, granted, the score is the most important thing. And how many times we see, let's say, a football game where one team has more yardage, more time of possession, but they lose the game, right? So score ultimately is the thing. But again, if you are looking at the things you can control and you're having success at the things you can control, and it's because you're focusing on the fundamentals, then chances are you're going to be more successful. So your skill, your fundamentals, are you prepared? Are you covering every little detail? And then in the pyramid of success, you have team spirit. Now, you think this would be kind of a natural thing, but a lot of times we forget about being our own cheerleader or being a cheerleader for the company or being a cheerleader for whatever. But when it comes to team spirit, it goes beyond cheerleading. It is a genuine consideration for others, an eagerness to sacrifice personal interest of glory for the welfare of all. I mean, in today's age, people would blow that right off the pyramid, because we're such a narcissistic, self-serving society. Me first, look at me. I mean, that's all social media is. And we forget that we need to have a team spirit, not just the rah, but we need to make sure that we have a genuine, that's the word, genuine, you underline, consideration for others, an eagerness to sacrifice personal interest of glory for the welfare of all. And that's important in a team. We don't see that now in teams. You know, we see people leaving, transfer portal. We see people sitting out of bowl games because it's all about them. And that's fine. You can argue that later. But again, John Wooden, 10 national championships in 12 years, 660 plus wins, 5-time coach of the year, talking about team. An eagerness to sacrifice personal interests for the glory, personal interests of glory for the welfare and glory of everyone. And then as you get to the top, the second to the highest tier, you've got two things. You've got poise, just being yourself, being at ease in any situation, never fighting yourself. And of course, confidence, respect without fear, may come from being prepared and keeping all things in proper perspective. See, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance, at least in my opinion. Confidence is having the ability, knowing you have the ability to get things done, and you don't need to flaunt it. You just have the confidence to get things done because you prepared, because you've gotten ready, you've done your due diligence, maybe you have experience in it, whatever it is, you know you can get the job done. And so you're confident. Arrogance is you're not so sure you can get the job done, but you want other people to believe it. So you're going to talk yourself up a big game. That's the difference. And a lot of times people will look at confident people and be like, oh, they're arrogant. No, they're confident. Arrogance are the ones that if you really look at it, they're just talking up a big game. And if you watch them, they really can't get the job done. So again, there is a big difference, but you have to have confidence. And if you do all of this, it leads to competitive greatness, the pinnacle, the peak of the pyramid of success. Competitive greatness. Be at your best when your best is needed. Enjoyment of a difficult challenge. You're ready. Think about all the athletes like a Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, want the ball at the buzzer. They might miss many shots, but do you remember those shots that they missed? Not really. You remember the ones that they make. But the ones that they make are very small and limited. But they're prepared to take that shot and deal with the consequences. And so that's what you got with the pyramid of success when you take a look at it. And that's just the start. Then you've got like the mortar on the side, and you've got some other things. In fact, real quick, the mortar on the side. So you've got the left and side. So you have your pinnacle, which is competitive greatness. And then that is, according to John Wooden, on his pyramid, maybe you add something different on the outside, but his was faith through prayer, patience, because good things take time to develop. And then he had the force of human spirit, which was ambition for noble goals, adaptability to any situation, resourcefulness, proper judgment, and fight, which was determined effort. So again, this is the mortar on the outside. You had the pinnacle, and then the blocks, and then the mortar on the outside. The other side of the pyramid was the strength of human character. So you have the force of the human spirit, ambition for noble goals, adaptability to any situation, resourcefulness, proper judgment, and fight, a determined effort. Then on the other side, you have the strength of human character, sincerity, where you keep friends, honesty in thoughts and action, reliability creates respect, and integrity is purity of intention. And then if that wasn't enough, he tops it off with his 7-point creed. Be true to yourself, help others, make each day your masterpiece. I like that one. Actually, they're all pretty good. But be true to yourself, help others, make each day your masterpiece, drink deeply from good books, especially the Bible, make friendship a fine art, build a shelter against a rainy day, and pray for guidance and count and give thanks for your blessings every day. If you need something to maybe start to build your pyramid of success on, these 7 points might be a good place to start. Be true to yourself. Help others. Make each day your masterpiece. That's the great thing about every day. Sometimes we dread, oh, it's Monday. But you know what? It's a blank slate. We can start all over. Last week is last week. We can paint a masterpiece on Monday that leads to Tuesday, that leads to Wednesday. And the next thing you know, you have a Sistine Chapel of a great week. And then, of course, reading good books, especially the Bible, John Wooden says, man of faith, or just ingesting information, good information. Make friendship a fine art. Craft those relationships. Make them something that is like awe-inspiring, perhaps. Because again, friendships, big part of or relationships, friendships, relationships, whatever it is, business acquaintances and so on, all those relationships, big part of the pyramid of success. Obviously, build a shelter against a rainy day and pray for guidance and give thanks. We have blessings every day in this country. A lot of people, it was the end of the world when the election came. But we have a lot of blessings. You had a $1,200 iPhone you got to run to and bitch and complain on social media because you could afford a $1,200 iPhone, I guess. It's not a bad thing to have. Well, I'm just saying, you can afford the expensive smartphone. A lot of places in this country, They don't have that. And then if you want to take that and move it into action, 5 complete sets of actions that you can direct you and improve you is how you think. How do you think? Are you thinking positive? Are you thinking negative? You have a positive growth mindset? Or is it negative? Doom and gloom. How you teach, how you lead, how you mentor. And those are some things that you can put in practical application of all of this. How you think. Remember, our thoughts lead to action. And it goes before that. What's on our heart, we dwell on with our thoughts. And our thoughts move to action. So if we have a 7-point creed of being true to yourself, helping others, making each day a masterpiece, making friendship a fine art, and being thankful for the blessings that we have every day, our thought process is going to be moving towards that. Our actions are going to be a result of that. And then if we're doing that, we're setting a good example. Teaching, we're leading, and we're mentoring in a good way because our actions are what people are going to see, and our actions are what people are going to take from us. And that's going to be what people will remember us for. So again, you've got the pyramid of success, and you've got what John Wooden has put down. But one of the guys that I think was probably the most difficult person for John Wooden to coach was probably Bill Walton. Bill Walton was a good player, but, it was the 70s and he had the long hair and, the beard, and John Wooden didn't like that. I mean, it was a clash of the 1940s and 50s Wooden and the new age of basketball player, the freedom thinker. But this is what Bill Walton had to say about the pregame speeches that he remembers John Wooden giving and really the impact it had on him.
So Coach Wooden, his pregame speech was the same. And it's a message that you have to absorb, believe, trust, and then implement in your life. Because he would come into our locker room and we're all ready to go. We're just fired up as can be. We're waiting for him to give us the big speech, give us the keys to victory, tell us what it's going to take to be great. And he'd walk in there and he'd look at us with his little rolled up program. He never opened up this program. I mean, it could have been the menu up at the cafeteria upstairs. He pointed at us with that program and he said, "Men, I've done my job. The rest is up to you. When that game starts, don't ever look over here at the sideline to me because I can't do anything more to help you."
See, John Wooden knew that he had prepared his players for the game. He knew he put in the time and the preparation during practice. And now it was up to the players to execute that preparation. Now, there might be times where you have to have in-game strategy and things like that, right? Out of bounds plays, whatever. But John Wooden knew that he had prepared his team for success. And now he can't go out there and shoot the ball. It's up to the players now to go out there and earn that success. So your preparation will dictate the outcomes you put in, the time that you put in, the effort that you put in. Will you be prepared? And then will you execute that which you're prepared for? I guess that's something that you'll have to look at. But John Wooden prepared his players so that his players could now take the court and be successful. And then Bill Walton talking about John Wooden's 2 sets of threes.
And then Coach Wooden, he lived by his 2 sets of threes. And he implored us to give it a try. And those 2 sets of threes: don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses. That covers a lot of ground. And then Coach Wooden had a billion maxims and mantras that he would throw out at just the appropriate time. His use of the English language, unparalleled. That was his true love. And so he would say things to us like, be quick, but don't hurry, whatever the heck that means. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Happiness begins when selfishness ends. Never mistake activity for achievement. The worst things you could do for the ones you love are the things they could and should do for themselves. Stubbornness we deprecate, firmness we condone. The former is my neighbor's trait, the latter is my own. When everybody thinks alike, nobody thinks. It's okay to disagree, just don't be disagreeable. And then the one that he wrote for me on the day I graduated from UCLA, June 1974, 45 and a half years ago. To Bill Walton, it's the things you learn after you know it all that count. John Wooden. That still sits on my desk. But his fallback go-to mantra was always the same. He would look at us with a straight face, and he would say, he was a very serious guy, and took his job with great duty, solemnity, respect. He would look at us and he would say, remember guys, basketball is just like life. It's not a game of size and strength, it's a game of skill, timing, and position. It's not how big you are, it's how big you play. It's not how high you jump, it's where you are and when you jump. And so while Coach Wooden is racing through all these positive aspects of our personal foundation, I'm scratching my head. That's why I'm bald today, because I just can never stop scratching my head. And I would just look at him and I'd say, Coach, you cannot possibly believe these things that you're saying, particularly when you tell us that basketball is not a game of size and strength. Come on. Kareem has all the records. Shaq has all the money. And Wilt has 20,000 girlfriends. So you tell me it's not a game of size and strength? And he'd look at me and say, Walton, you're the slowest learner I've ever had. Don't you realize it's not about stuff? It's not about material accumulation. It's about training the mind to become the champion in everything that you do. But that requires you to play on the teeter-totter of life. Leadership and risk and fearlessness, ego, humility, and making that decision and the choice that I am going to make the sacrifice for the greater goals of the team.
Don't lie. Don't cheat. Don't steal. Don't whine. Don't complain. Don't make excuses. There is a lot of that going on in today's society, especially the whining, the complaining, and the making excuses. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. That's something that I would hope we've all heard at some point. I've heard it enough in my lifetime. Maybe that's because I've played sports and it's a sports analogy. But again, are you ready? I've always told students, especially, if your dream job came and they offered it to you. This was especially when I was teaching radio broadcasting, because I wanted to be radio broadcasters or media entertainers. If that dream job, those people came to you and said, hey, we want you to audition for this dream job that you want, would you be ready for it? And if not, why not? Are you prepared for when that opportunity of a lifetime comes your way? Are you ready to grab it? Take it. Put your best effort into it. Because it's the things that you learn after you know it all that's important. One thing that John Wooden wrote to Bill Walton. Because if you take a look at that last analogy, basketball is just like life. It's not a game of size or strength, but of skill, timing, and position. Not how big you are or how big you play. It's not how high you can jump, but where and when you jump. You could be in the training room and you could have a vertical of 12 feet. Does that help you in the basketball gym? On the court? Well, it does when you're near the basket and you've got the ball and maybe you've isolated the person guarding you so that you can turn and maybe dunk it. But if you're at center court for the tip and you go up and you win the tip for the jump ball, yeah, that's when it matters. Or if you're going to go up and block a shot, jumping at the right time so you get that block shot is going to matter. Manute Bol, if you don't know who he is, Google him. He was a 7'7" basketball player. He could block some shots. Bill Russell, if you really want to know about shot blocking, Bill Russell, I think he was maybe 6'10", not really all that tall and maybe in the 60s, that's pretty big. But by today's standards, I mean, Shaq was 7'4". But again, Bill Russell changed the game of basketball in the 1960s because he could block shots. In fact, Red Auerbach, his coach, didn't even want him to score points. He's like, don't even worry about scoring points. Block those shots, get those rebounds. So Bill Russell became one of the greatest basketball players of all time. In my opinion, the greatest basketball player in all time. And he wasn't even scoring points. Now, he got his share of points, but he was blocking shots. Sometimes he'd have 6 points, 20 blocks, and maybe 20 rebounds. His double-doubles came without points. So again, it's what you do with the abilities that you have, the talents that you have, that are going to matter. And in the end, you take all those talents that you have and everything that was in the pyramid of success, and you're true to yourself. You're out there helping others. You're making each day your masterpiece, making friendship a fine art, and you're being thankful for the blessings that you have every day. And you're putting in the work. Basically, what you're doing in the end is you're training the mind to become a champion in everything you do. Everything. You're training the mind to become a champion in everything you do. And if you do that and you have the championship mindset, then chances are you're going to have more success and greater success in life than if you don't. This is Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. Check out our website, radiowarp.com. That's radio, W-A-R-P, radiowarp.com. And you can click on the show logo, the Two Steps Ahead podcast show logo. All of our past shows will pop up. There's also some other pretty cool things on the website as well that you might want to check out. You can also, when you look on the website and you click our logo, it takes you to our Rumble page, which is our video page. There's also an orange banner across the center of the page. You click on that, takes you to our audio page, SoundCloud. There you can actually download and take episodes with you on the go. Or you can just listen anywhere you listen to podcasts. Just do your search of TWO for Two Steps Ahead podcast, and we pop up. You can also just do that in an internet search as well. So we're pretty easy to find. Social media, at Two Steps Ahead podcast. Again, TWO, at Two Steps Ahead podcast. And our email, twostepsaheadpodcast@gmail.com. Go ahead, reach out. Let us know what you think. And again, I always like to throw this out there. If you have no place to go and you're not sure who to reach out to and you think you're just all alone in this world, reach out. If I can't help you, I will find somebody that can. So don't be a stranger. Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom. Hey, thanks for listening. Do tell a friend. And until next time, God bless.